Hi, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. It's time to get started for the Network Plus study group. This is the pre-show. If you're watching this on the replay, the Network Plus study group will start in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, I have a few things I have to do before we get things started. I haven't done my script yet, so everybody gets to listen to this nonsense before we get things going. Let me make sure I'm recording here. Yep, recording there. Looks good. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer Network Plus study group. This study group was recorded on February 19th, 2020. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer Network Plus study group after show. This after show was recorded on February 19th, 2020. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. Well, there. We have now done podcast intros. That part is finished. Let's get some other things up here on the screen. What are we doing today? Network Plus. That's good. It's February. That's good. I hope I got all of this in here. I did these questions, I don't know, weeks ago. So we're going to see just how much I remember. Hello, chat room. We can now shift our view. Let me pop out the chat. There it is. Bring it down. Got some folks joining. There's Bristol, UK, which is different than Bristol, Florida, I'm told. South Africa is here. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Got this. Nigeria, welcome in. Ireland is here. Everyone except the U.S. There they are. There's D.C. D.C. was at the top. Sorry, Paul. Brooklyn is here. Saudi Arabia, welcome. CT, Connecticut, welcome. Mizzou's here. San Diego. Another San Diego. Seattle is here. Germany, welcome. Texas, London. London. Denver's here. Arizona. Atlanta, Georgia. Hello, Tampa. Thanks for being here. Vegas, Phoenix, Maryland. My Maryland is here. Colorado, Jacksonville, Cleveland, Jamaica, another Maryland. Mesquite, Texas. Virginia Beach, Guyana, Detroit, all over. Romania is here. Welcome. Netherlands, more Texas. Lots of Texas. We shall not mess with you. Dublin is here. Johannesburg. India. Another Dallas. Lots of Texas today. Welcome. Thanks for being here. There's Tim from Atlanta. Virginia is here. Another Maryland. Toronto, welcome. Hello, hello. Egypt. Ringgold, Georgia. Baghdad, welcome. Fort Lauderdale. Thailand. Illinois. We got a lot here for Network Plus today. We're doing all Network Plus questions. I've got all new questions. These are all new questions every time. Sort of redundant for me to say that. Oh, I need to put up my my little circle on the screen so that everybody can see that. I got to change the preferences just a bit. And then we could start that. I think that's in pretty good shape. So looking at my cameras, I'm going to do a quick camera check, which you really can't see. You can kind of see me flipping through at the bottom. There's a little window here. That's my auxiliary output window for my secondary video that you can't see, and that's me popping through all of the different windows. Why do I not see one for, oh, we are missing a big one for my laptop. Laptop's not there. That's an important one to have. Oh, you know why? I want to explain to you why I do not have laptop video. This is pretty important. This is pretty good. This is one. See this? It's not plugged in. That is why we don't have laptop video. So when people say, "Is it plugged in?" and they wonder, "Is it?" No, it's not. It's not plugged in. There we go. There's a lot going on here. The laptop that's here is not usually here. This laptop's usually somewhere else. It's only here for the live streams. It's only here so that you can see what's on the live stream. So that's why it's not always plugged in. looking, why is it not there? Immediately, we're thinking the worst. Is it the video adapter? Do we have a problem with the translation between the output on the USB-C connection, the Thunderbolt connection? There's a converter that converts from Thunderbolt to SDI. There's an SDI connection that goes to the SDI matrix switch. There's a matrix switch connection that then redirects it to the video switch. No, it's just not plugged in. So that's what's going on. So we have resolved the problem. The biggest issue of my day has now been resolved. Back to the chat room. Hi, everybody. Welcome. North Carolina, Southampton, UK, Cincinnati, LA, Texas. The weather this time, what is it right now? 75 degrees Fahrenheit. High of 82 coming today. We're in really good shape. It's a beautiful day here in our Florida headquarters. Very nice. Arizona, North Carolina, St. Louis, Mo. We've got Tokyo. Welcome. Haven't been to Tokyo in a while. Got to get back over there. I keep meaning to take Mrs. Professor Messer over there. I did some seminars in Yokohama. It was fantastic. Really enjoyed our time there. We started actually on an island of, where was I? Got to think about where I was. In Japan, it was really a fantastic trip. We actually did Japan and Korea on that trip. It was really great. Fayetteville, welcome. Connecticut is here. Denver, Houston, St. Pete, welcome. Got a lot of St. Pete and Tampa people checking in. Welcome. Get there, West Virginia. It was Okinawa. That's where I was. Thank you. Thank you, chat room, for being my backup brain. Cadillac, Michigan, welcome. Welcome, welcome. We'll get to the links in just a moment, but you can pop up a new browser window, go to professormesser.com/QA and get that link. So that's where that is from. Hollywood, California, welcome. Thailand, welcome. Need to get back to Thailand, too. Went to Bangkok for some meetings and met with the airline there and talked to them about security and good stuff. That was fun. Kansas City, welcome. Abu Dhabi, welcome. We've got all Q&A today. I've got it all lined up. I think we've got everything going. I've actually had the studio up for a few hours now doing other things. And so this was sort of a transition into the live stream, which I thought would be easy. Not as easy as I thought it would be. There's a few extra buttons to push, like plugging in cables for the laptop and getting that going. It's just a Thunderbolt connection right here that missed that one completely. Hello, Port Charlotte. Baltimore again, welcome. We've got 2 minutes to go, or a minute and a half or so. All that we're doing today is Network Plus. Lots of Network Plus in this first hour. The second hour, kind of turn this around. I take messages back this direction. So if you want to, we'll do questions back to me. We'll open up the call-in line in the second hour. So that's our after show. You're welcome to call in or post messages there. So if you think of a question sometime during this first hour, which may not necessarily have to do with anything related to Network Plus, it can really be a question about anything, then you're welcome to post that on or call in the second hour. We can talk about that. It can be about technology. It can be about something in the news. We tend to stay away from politics and religion. That's our two big things. No politics, no religion. And weather is good. Technology is good. What I'm playing on Xbox right now is good. Those are things that are important in my life. Weather, technology, and Xbox. It's the simple things in my world to get that happening. We've got plenty to talk about also. When we start going through the detailed questions, we'll go through more of those things, but you're more than welcome just to stop through and do that. What am I playing? Division 2. I got back on Division 2 on Xbox because there's a new update coming on Division 2. So I don't know if that's going to be the right answer or not. Hopefully they'll be able to fix the problems that they had with the Division 2. Division 1 was so great. Division 2, not so much. But now it's noontime and we can talk about Network Plus things. So let's do that and start the live stream. Here we go, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2020 Professor Messer. I'm not even going to restart. We're just going to keep going with that. Welcome to the February 2020, whatever this is, Professor Messer Network Plus study group. We've got all live stream study group content today. That is all questions that come directly from the Network Plus exam objectives. Whenever we do one of these study groups, I write all new questions for the month. I ask you those questions online, and then interactively, you answer these questions. It's a lot of fun. You're going to love it. It's going to be great. We've got lots of questions from the A+ exam. I try to do these questions online. All you have to do is pop open a new browser window and go to this URL, professormesser.com/QA. If you go there, there'll be a question waiting for you right there. You can also use a separate app on your mobile device. This is called the Socrative Student app. Look for that in your favorite app store. It will ask you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer. PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you spell it right so that you can find the question that is waiting for you right here that says, a company has just received a used switch that was purchased from a third party. Which of the following should be performed first during the installation process? This is where you really have to step through and try to look at every single answer to see which one of these would be the first thing. And remember, to answer this, you go to professormesser.com/QA. Your possible answers are generate new keys, modify the management IP address, document each interface in the configuration, configure radius authentication, and disable unused interfaces. This would be a network switch. For those in the chat room thinking, is this the Nintendo Switch? It is not, unless you have some type of Ethernet adapter for your Nintendo Switch, so you're plugging your Switch into a Switch, which probably would not be as confusing as it really is. The company has purchased a used switch from a third party. Which of the following should be performed first during the installation process? Have a look at those answers, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. Thank you for being here on our Network Plus study group. Don't forget that we have a Network Plus question of the week available on the Twitter. You can subscribe there and follow us at professormesser.com/Twitter. Don't forget about the YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. All kinds of interesting things happening over there shortly. I promise you, there's things happening. And we've got a Network Plus, A+, and Security Plus questions of the day and week available on Instagram. Go to professormesser.com/Instagram, and you can see those questions there as well. Some people like to say, I'd like to support the site. Is there something I can do to help keep the lights on? And there is something that you can do that costs you no additional dollars. You can follow our Amazon link. Go to professormesser.com/Amazon. You can purchase products from Amazon at the same low price you've always used. There's no difference in the amount you pay, but they give us just a little bit of a commission. And does count up, does help quite a bit with keeping the websites going. There's multiple servers behind the scenes keeping all this craziness going. The lights literally are on right now. So that's one really great way to help. Visit professormesser.com/Amazon and click that Amazon link to shop over on the Amazon side. Today we're going to do Network Plus. The N10-007 is the current version of the exam. Those exam questions were released on March 1st, 2018. Which, if we do the math, there's usually about 3.5 years before those are retired. So 2018, 19, 20, 21. So the end of 2021 is probably when you would see this exam version retired. So if you're listening to this in February of 2020, you've got plenty of time. This is the version of the exam you should be studying for. It's a 90-minute exam. You can get a maximum of 90 questions. And it's a combination of both multiple choice questions, like the one we just saw, and performance-based questions, which we will see in just a moment. We'll talk more about that. One of the things I always tell people, though, if you really want to know what's on the exam, make sure you get the objectives. I have a link over to the CompTIA website that you'll find at professormesser.com/objectives. We're able to do these live streams thanks to your ongoing support. You help support us with our Network Plus course notes, with the audio and the video versions. All of these things are available for you to purchase for offline use. You can find them at professormesser.com/getnetplus, GETNETPLUS. A video version of this is available almost immediately after we're done. It processes for a few minutes, but it's almost always immediately available. And on our website at professormesser.com, there's also an audio version available at professormesser.com/podcast. And there are links there to link it into your podcast listening program. So the moment that it's available, it can be automatically downloaded and available for you to listen to in your podcasting application. If you do show up and want to see the replay, about a day later, my marketing manager, Lori, goes through all of the study group. She listens to the whole thing and puts down timestamps in the YouTube description. So if you look at the YouTube video description, you can click on a time and it takes you right to that time in the video. So if you very quickly are looking for something or you want to jump from question to answer, it's a great way to do it. So Lori is watching this now. Hi, Lori. She's also watching the live chat go by. So if you want to say hi to Lori, you can do that as well. Let's go back to that question we were just asking about, Professor Messer's Network Plus question. This is a rewind question from last month. And the question asks, a company has just received a used switch that was purchased from a third party. Which of the following should be performed first during the installation process? This is a series of questions. I left the answers up, so there's really no mystery here. 63% of you say generate new keys. 19% of you said to modify the management IP address. And then single digits for documenting each interface in the configuration, configuring radius authentication, and disabling unused interfaces. Now, when we first get a switch, you're not connecting to it over the internet, especially a used switch. You're usually connecting through a console, you're logging in, but you want to be sure that whatever encryption keys were on that device previously have been changed. That way, somebody who may have access to this from that previous ownership would not have access to this with those encryption keys. So we want to be sure that we update those keys, we change them, that these keys are very different than what we had there previously. You're going to SSH into this device, so you want to be sure the entire thing is fresh and new. And from at least a cryptography perspective, you are protecting yourself against somebody taking advantage of either a man in the middle or taking advantage of logging in without any credentials because they have assigned their keys into this device as well. This is a fantastic way to keep everything secure on your brand new switch. And of course, the 65% of you that said generate new keys got that one absolutely right. This was a question from last month. We do this rewind question at the beginning just to see if everybody's getting in, answering the question, and of course, visiting professormesser.com/QA will get you there. You can stay on that page. I will change the questions as we go along. You don't have to move to any other page at that point. Now, I mentioned earlier that the question is the exam that you take is a combination of multiple choice questions like this one and performance-based questions. You'll get a handful of performance-based questions right at the beginning of the exam. The performance-based questions are a little bit different than what you would find on they are not multiple choice. They're anything but multiple choice. They're questions that might be drag and drop. They might be fill in the blank. They might ask you to put things in particular order. There might be a matching question. We never know exactly what may be coming. So I have a question available for you that is, this one happens to be fill in the blank. Now, technically, you're probably not going to see a fill in the blank question on your exam. I'm making these a little bit harder for you in the study group. When you get to your exam, it's going to be so easy for you. This one, I'm asking you to name 4 connectors, and here they are. These are the 4 connectors. I didn't put anything in here. Now, do not put the answer in the chat room. If you think you know what these connectors are, you want to answer them at professormesser.com/QA. Again, please do not answer in the chat room for the rest of this series of questions today. We're going to pretend that we have nothing in front of us that we can pull from. This is all new content. We don't have our Google with us. No Googling. No hints in the chat room. We're all going to go directly to professormesser.QA and lock in your answer. Now, some people are giving me very broad answers. I'm looking for specific connector names for A, for B, for C, and for D. So I want to know the name, the very specific name of those connectors. If I said to somebody, I need a replacement for letter C there, I need a blank connector. So it needs to be very specific. in the type of connector that is there. So hopefully you're familiar with those 4 types of connectors. I only did 4 of them, so I didn't go too crazy with the fill in the blanks. I made sure that it would be there. Now, on your actual exam, what you would probably see are 4 connectors, and then you'll probably see 7 or 8 different options at the bottom, and you have to match them. That's very common. They don't give you a 1-to-1 generally on the exam every time. They may have 4 or 5 of them that you don't use, but they prompt you at least to what those are. I'm not prompting you. I'm going to do this a little bit more difficult with these connectors. I want you to know what these connector names are. So you can't see this on your side, and obviously we can't tabulate these results because it's a fill-in-the-blank answer. Some of you are very, very spot on with these. You're looking at them. Some of you are not quite sure about the 4th one. I think the last one, the connector D there on the end, people are having a few challenges with that one and exactly what it is. All 4 of these, by the way, are on the exam. So this is one where you do want to go through this connection and know what each one of these are. And this is not the full list of connectors that you need to know on this exam as well. So make sure you're familiar with what these happen to be, plus all of the others. I have 2 videos on this, one that is on copper connectors, one that is on fiber connectors. So you have to know all of them to be able to do this. Hopefully, this is one that you are familiar with when you go through all of these. C kind of is a trick, isn't it? On C, we're gonna revisit that because I'm looking at this as well, thinking I could go a couple of directions on that. I might even give you full credit depending on what you choose for C. So well done, Chris, for pointing out that C might be a little one. Now, obviously, for those of you that are listening in on the podcast, this particular question doesn't help you very much. So make sure that you're familiar with all of these connectors. That's not something you will want to run on whenever you start working through the exam. You really need to know these solid. This is one that you should hit, and you should just keep going. It should be one that you never stop with being able to work through all of these. Again, no hints in the chat room. Let's go through each one of these. Maybe you're familiar with these and being able to work through them. This should be a good set. A lot of people struggling with D. So let's step through each one of these, A, B, C, and D. So your first one on there, let's have a look to see what this is. The first connector is an F connector. This is the type of coax connector that you might find on a cable modem, for example. There's your networking hook. Of course, this is the type of cable connector we use for practically anything to have this here, the F connector. So hopefully that's one you can be very familiar with if you have any type of cable television in your home. That screw-on F connector is the one you would use there. The second on our list, that B list, is an SC connector, or a subscriber connector. Some people refer to it as the square connector because you can see that those particular interfaces that plug into your switch or your router are square on the end. So the SC, it's a good way to remember. That's a good mnemonic to remember those. They lock in place. You have to kind of unlock them to pull them out of that SC connection. So they stay, once you get them in there, they stay in place pretty darn well. They have a spring-loaded disconnection on them when you plug them in and they're done. C, you kind of go either way with this. The B and C connector is one of those. The B and C is what's on the end of this. And the part that's crazy is the B and C connector on the end is actually screwed onto an F connector. So it's actually 2 of them for this one to have this here. I would accept an F connector here, but really B and C. That is the one we're looking for this one. It's a bayonet connector. That's the B in the B and C is bayonet, which means you plug it in, you twist it a quarter of the way there to have it lock in place to have those there. The B and C is a very common one to see on wide area network connections. We do a lot of B and C in this room. We have a lot of video in this room, our video connections. So not technically a network, but it is a digital network signal going through those B and C connectors, sending the video through this particular configuration. And lastly, so we went copper, fiber, copper. The last one is a fiber connector. That is an MTRJ. MTRJ is that piece of it. So that is another fiber connector. Some people mentioning that C connector, BNC, is British Naval Connector. It is not. British Naval Connector is not the name of that device. Has nothing to do with the British. Was not created by the British. It's not naval. I'm not even sure how that even came about. But it's an odd term to associate when it's not naval, it's not British. So let's call it a British Naval Connector. That's not actually the way that one works out. Hopefully you're familiar now with all of these connectors. As I mentioned, all of these connectors are part of the exam objectives. Make sure you're familiar with the connectors on the exam. That'd be one to really be worrying about. We don't mention ThinNet for BNC because nobody uses ThinNet. ThinNet, for those of you that are in the chat room, ThinNet is not on the exam objectives. It is a type of early 10 megabit Ethernet network running over coax that is never used any longer. The only place you'd see it is really, really old books. So ThinNet is not how I would describe BNC because it has no application in the actual world to have those there. Hopefully you're familiar with all four of those. If you're worried about connectors, you could easily get a question like this on the exam. Make sure you're familiar with all of them from the exam connectors. So let's keep this going. Hopefully you're familiar now with the performance-based questions. Many people think performance-based means a simulation, that you're going to be put at a command prompt and asked to perform a function, and you might be asked to do that. But not all of the performance-based questions are simulations. They are performance-based, like this one, like matching for those pieces. ThinNet was not the one that used vampire taps. ThickNet used the vampire taps. ThinNet used the T connector on the BNC to be able to tap into those connections. Boy, that takes me back, doesn't it? I'm glad we're not doing coax for our Ethernet any longer. Oh, wait, there's twinax on 10 gig. Gosh darn it. We were doing so well. And now we've got it. Nobody uses ThinNet anymore. There are no extremely specific things using ThinNet. You won't see it. It's not out there. If you see it, it's probably got a lot of cobwebs around it. It's got dust all over it. Nobody else is having one of those situations. Let's do another question. Now let's jump back to multiple choice. This multiple choice question asks, which of the following would be the best way to prevent an invalid spanning tree configuration? Which of the following would be the best way to prevent an invalid spanning tree configuration? Would it be, here we go, would it be DHCP snooping? Would it be flood guard? Would it be file integrity monitoring? Would it be vulnerability scanning? Or would it be BPDU guard? Those are 5 actual things. They don't sound like actual things. Some of them sound like I made them up, but I didn't. They are all 5 real things. The question asks, which of the following would be the best way to prevent an invalid spanning tree configuration? Would it be DHCP snooping? Would it be flood guard? Would it be file integrity monitoring? Would it be vulnerability scanning? Or would it be BPDU guard? Do you think you know the answer? Please do not answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and answer there. Speaking of ThinNet, I used Token Ring over ThinNet. How you like that? Actually, technically, it was not Token Ring. It was a derivative that ran at 100 megabit. It was sort of like an ArcNet derivative with tokens. We saw all kinds of crazy stuff before we finally decided on Ethernet as the international standard for remaining sane in all of those. If you think you know the answer to the question, don't answer in the chat room. You want to visit professormesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer. This is one you want to avoid, certainly. If you're doing anything with networking in your career, eventually you will run into a spanning tree challenge. Something is going a little wonky with spanning tree. It behooves you to learn as much as you can about spanning tree on your network. If you really understand the way that it works, it's really not so hard. I think spanning tree is one of those that you're very scared of. It seems like it'd be really, really difficult. And then when you peel away the onion, you'll notice, well, this wasn't hard at all. It's not a very difficult type of thing to work with. It's really more about organization and knowing where things are on the network and making sure they're configured properly. And if you do it with that in mind, you create a spreadsheet, everything's documented, everybody knows what the spanning tree configuration is, you're usually in pretty good shape, and it works like a champ. It's a great type of technology to have in your network. So let's see how you did with this question. Which of the following would be the best way to prevent a invalid spanning tree configuration? We're a little torn, aren't we? We do have a plurality. 39% of us say a BPDU guard. We did not get a majority on this one. Pretty close. 29% said flood guard. That's how you prevent invalid spanning tree configs. A tie for third with DHCP snooping and file integrity monitoring at about 12 or 13% apiece. And then lastly, vulnerability scanning at 8%. Well, if you ever see anything related to spanning tree, the terms you're really looking for is the protocols that spanning tree uses. And spanning tree uses the bridge protocols to be able to do this. Bridging is effectively switching. It's what we used to call switches before there were switches, is bridges. The bridge protocol data unit, the BPDU, is what you're looking for. And the way that we have configured our switches to avoid any problems with spanning tree is to create a mechanism within the switch that if it ever sees any spanning tree protocol like BPDU come across that connection, shut it down. Don't let it get anywhere else. So every interface that's plugged into a workstation, a laptop, somebody's an in-user connection, you want to prevent any BPDUs from traversing the network. So you turn on the switch, you turn on a feature called BPDU Guard, the Bridge Protocol Data Unit Guard, and it will prevent those, because the only thing that should be sending BPDUs is the switch itself, and the switch should be sending that to another switch. So as long as you make sure that that's the only BPDUs that can ever show up on the network, you're in good shape. If you want to bring down a network, spoof some BPDUs and send them out over your workstation connection. And if they don't have BPDU guard turned on, that person can easily bring down your network. How scary is that? So make sure you really have your BPDU configuration set properly. Whenever you start looking at BPDU, it's going to be on an interface for a workstation. So that's where that is coming from. Workstations don't send those. If you ever see one, just shut it down and keep the rest of your network from shutting down with it. So you may find that a certain workstation suddenly no longer connected to the network, but you saved everyone else by sacrificing that one workstation on the network. Then you get to visit that workstation and find out, why are you sending BPDUs? What is going on here? Has somebody accessed your machine? Does it have some type of malware on it? What is going on that this is happening? And then you can solve that particular problem. BPDU Guard was the right answer to prevent an invalid spanning tree configuration. So if you answered E, 40% of you chose that answer for BPDU Guard. That is the right answer. A flood guard, very useful for preventing a flooding of information, such as a broadcast storm on your network. Flood guard is a very nice thing to have configured on your switch, but it doesn't quite have anything to do with BPDUs specifically. Flood guard is to prevent sort of an overloading of the network, whereas the BPDU guard is a very specific thing that it is looking for. We had a tie between DHCP snooping and file integrity monitoring. DHCP snooping is used to make sure that people do not put a fake DHCP server on your network or a rogue DHCP server on your network. That is one that can become very useful. All these little security features we need to turn on our switches just to keep everything up and running. File integrity monitoring is commonly run on a server or a workstation itself, commonly on a server, so that it is always watching the files. And if any file changes, it either identifies that for you or prevents that change from occurring. There's a lot of files on your server that should never change, and the file integrity monitoring is a good way to prevent that. And vulnerability scanning. Obviously, if you're running a vulnerability scan, you're looking for some vulnerabilities that may exist on a device across the network. That does not help anything relating to spanning tree, although, of course, scanning your network for vulnerabilities is often a very good thing to do, especially if you're on the security side. So the only real answer here, the best answer, the only one that does fit, is that last one, the BPDU guard. Let's do another question, shall we? For those of you looking to participate, we've got the link right here at the bottom where you can answer the question. ProfessorMesser.com/QA would allow you to answer this question that asks, which of the following would be the best way to determine a port used by a remote service? Which of the following would be the best way to determine a port used by a remote service? Would you use traceroute, nmap, dig, ifconfig, or IP tables? 5 different options, 5 real things: traceroute, nmap, dig, ifconfig, IP tables. Which of those would be the best way to determine a port used by a remote service? If you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. You want to answer by going right here at the bottom, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. Hopefully that's one that you know right off. All 5 of those are commands that come directly from the Network Plus exam objectives. So if you think you know the answer and lock it in, good. But look at the other answers and make sure you know what those do as well. This is one thing that is more of a broad question on the exam, is they want you to understand what these technologies do. They may not necessarily want you to have a very detailed knowledge of every possible flag and option that you can configure for these. Nmap's a good choice of that. Nmap has about 200, 300 different things you can do. They're not expecting you to know all 200 of those different options. What they really want you to know is, when would you use this? When would be the best place to use that particular technology? So if you can go through each of those and think, this is when I'd use that one, this is how I would use this one, then you're in pretty good shape to be able to have that there. Hopefully that's one where you're familiar with some of those options. Which of those would be the best way? Lock in your answer. I think a lot of you knew this one. We had a lot of answers come in almost immediately for this one. Let's see how we did. 67% say it's nmap. Definitely a majority, a strong majority on that one. 18% said traceroute is how you would determine a port used by a remote service. And then single digits for dig, ifconfig, and IP tables. So nmap, fantastic. I agree in the chat room. It's a fantastic tool. The very first content I ever wrote was a book on nmap. That was the first thing I ever published. Nmap was the secret of network cartography, because with nmap, you can map out the network and see everything that happens to be out there. You can do things like perform a port scan of a remote device, which identifies where the open ports are on a machine that's somewhere over the network. nmap can also perform an operating system scan without logging into that operating system. By sending specially crafted packets and examining the response to those specially crafted packets, the nmap can determine slight variations between the responses of Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and other operating systems, and can, in some cases, tell you the exact version of that operating system. And even crazier, it can do the same thing with services. So it can send specially crafted messages to, for instance, a web server open port. Look at the response. Was it really a web server? What type of web server was it? What version of web server was it? All without having to log into that device. All without having any type of access to that device. A remarkable product, incredible capabilities. It is simply extended even further with scripts that you could run. The nmap scripting engine, NSE, allows you to do that. nmap is commonly used as a command prompt utility that you may have available in practically any operating system. So if you're running Linux, Windows, Mac OS, and in fact, there's versions available for other operating systems as well. Things you may not expect, all from nmap. nmap.org would be able to do that for you. So if you answered nmap, you got that one absolutely right. 69% of you got that one absolutely right. 18% said traceroute. Traceroute, very useful to be able to use this. Traceroute's fantastic to know what routers are between me and another device. Be able to show me the route that I need to use to get from one place to another. Very, very nice to have that there. Traceroute doesn't, however, tell me what ports are being used by a remote service. It really is a very high-level pathing to explain to me how a packet gets from point A to point B. It doesn't explain to me how services are used once the packet gets there. Dig is sort of the newer version of NSLOOKUP. It allows you to query a name server and get a response. Although Dig is available on Linux and Mac OS, it's not something that ships on Windows, but you can easily download Dig and have that executable on your machine. You may want to look at doing that. Very useful to have that there. I know that Dig is available on name service distributions from, it's the Berkeley name service, Bind. The Windows Bind, B-I-N-D, the Berkeley Internet name service distribution. So Bind has an executable inside of it for dig.exe that you can download and put on your Windows machine. If you're doing anything relating to networking or name services, get your hand on Dig. It's a nice little utility. Ifconfig is the configuration of the interfaces on a Linux or a Mac OS machine. 4% of you chose that. It doesn't tell you what port number is open on a remote device, however. It just tells you about the IP configuration on your local machine and the interface configurations on that local machine. IP tables is a type of firewall that you commonly find on Linux devices. IP tables also does not tell us anything about a remote port and remote services on a remote device, remote. So that's one where the only answer here that really makes any sense is answer B, Nmap. 69% of you say Nmap, so I think you were spot on with this one. You knew Nmap was the right tool to use. Well done with that one. We have so much on the networking exam, everything from all of these different utilities, cabling, fiber interfaces, encryption technologies, what proxies do what. There's so much here. It is a very, very broad and scope. The scope of Network Plus is extremely big. So one of the things I always recommend doing is, as you're watching the videos, take plenty of notes. It certainly is going to help you when you're ready to study with some of these things. But of course, there are a ton of notes that you could take. There's so many videos, and you may not have time to go through every video. And as you go through them, are you really getting the best quality notes that you possibly could? So what I've done is take everything from every video, all of the important text, all of the important graphics, all of the important tables, and I put them into one document. This is Professor Messer's N10-007 course notes. They look like this. This is the digital version that you can purchase and download right now to your computer. 66 pages of content. And as you go through and look at the details of this, you can see all of the text, the port numbers, the graphics, the charts, everything that's in all of these different documents, videos, everything I have on my course is in the course notes. There's a ton of information to review. It's all in one place, all in one PDF file. You can move that PDF file to all of your mobile devices. So you can, when you're traveling, it's on your phone. You can have it on your tablet. You can have it on your laptop when you get home. You can put it up on your television. A simple PDF file allows you to do that. And it also, every penny of this goes back to help keep the website going. You can find out more information about this at professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes. There's a digital version as well as the physical version. It's the same information on the physical version. We didn't change anything. But some people like to have a paper version of this, a dead tree version, as we say, of the course notes. And this is one that when you purchase the physical version, I have to ship this to you, but I give you the digital version for free. So even when you purchase the physical version, you can download that digital version, have it available immediately right from my website. Find out more about that, professormesser.com/NPCN, or follow the links on the website for more information. And of course, thank you for your ongoing support with this. It really does go a long way to keeping everything going. Let's keep going ourselves. We have another question available for you. This question asks, a switch makes forwarding decisions based on the destination MAC address of a frame. Which OSI layer is associated with this process? A switch makes a forwarding decision based on the destination MAC address of a frame. What OSI layer is associated with this process? And I only put 5 of them here to make it, or did I? Did I put all 7? Yes, I did. Good. Layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So hopefully that can help you as you go trying to figure out the details of this. If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. You might be able to make that happen. That's one of those that you could go through this process and figure out the details. Hopefully you are familiar with the OSI model and being able to work through these. If you're doing anything in networking, you're going to use the OSI model all the time to be able to talk to other people, to be able to communicate where you think a problem may be occurring, to think about where things might be happening. This is one where this might help you as you go through the process. A lot of people, when they first start studying the OSI model, think this is a little bit odd because it is a model. It's not a thing you can touch. It's not a thing you can configure. It's just a broad way of talking about technology. So hopefully you're familiar with the OSI model and being able to work through all of these different pieces of this. Lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer what this happens to be. I don't want to look and see what the answer is. I want to see if you're familiar with this. Hopefully I didn't give you too much detail on this one to be able to figure out what these happen to be. Let's see. We've got so many people lock this one in fast. I hope we got a good number on this one. Hope everybody got this one right. A switch makes forwarding decisions based on the destination MAC address of a frame. Let me put my head up there so we can see it all. Which OSI layer is associated with this process? Is it layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7? 80% of us say it's layer 2. I think if we have to ask the audience, that's the one we would go with. 10% of us say layer 3, though. So at least we got into the double digits for layer 3. 9% say, or 6% say layer 4. 2% say layer 1. It's pretty much a tie for fourth. Layer 1, 5, 6, and 7 are 1 and 2% apiece. So that is one where you have to think about where this comes from. A switch makes forwarding decisions based on the destination MAC address of a frame. Now, whenever you see that where the MAC address is there and the OSI layer associated with this, you should immediately start thinking about MAC addresses are at OSI layer 2. The MAC address is the data link address, the data link control address, specifically DLC, you'll sometimes hear it referred to. It's the data link address, the lowest level address to be able to communicate with that technology over the network. For example, if you're on a wide area network connection that's a point-to-point, you don't have MAC addresses because there's only 2 devices. You have a DTE, data terminal equipment, and a DCE, data communications equipment. That's it. So that's one where you go back, there's only 2 devices, so you just refer to each other. I'm the DTE, you're the DCE, let's talk back and forth. But on Ethernet, we can have many, many hundreds or thousands of devices. We need something that identifies each one of those devices and makes them unique. And to be able to do that, we do it with the MAC address, the data link control address on the network, the OSI layer 2 address on the network. MAC address in token ring, also layer 2. MAC address in practically any type of topology. Whenever you see MAC address, you should automatically think that's layer 2. Data link. I don't know why I'm talking token ring today. Token ring's not on the exam. It's stuck in my head now. We were talking about coax and the way we used to do networking. Later on, we'll talk about ATM and how we used to segment and reassemble frames into cells, which we won't at all. I promise. OSI layer 2, whenever you see anything talking about a switch, talking about a MAC address, talking about switching, talking about bridging, talking about any of those things, you should immediately think layer 2. That's what we are talking about. So that's where, when you're going through OSI objectives, that's where that would come from. Now, some of you said, I don't think it's layer 2. I think it's layer 3. We've dropped to 9% say it's layer 3. Layer 3 is the next layer up, which is the IP layer. Or at least in the modern world, we think of that as the internet protocol layer. So if you see an IP address, that's a layer 3 address. Routers, for example, make routing decisions based on destination IP addresses. They are making that decision based on the layer 3 information of that frame. So anytime you see switching layer 2, anytime you see routing layer 3, anytime you see MAC address layer 2, anytime you see IP address layer 3. So that should help you as you're trying to determine, is it layer 2 or layer 3? Those are the things that should immediately prompt you in your mind to know what OSI layers those happen to be. If you answered OSI layer 2, 80% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Let's do another one. This is one that came up multiple times over the month. So I thought this would be fun to do online, and we'll see how this goes. Here is the question that seem to stymie everyone in the world. And let's see how you do. Which of the following would be the fastest Ethernet standard supported by Category 5 cabling? Which of the following would be the fastest Ethernet standard supported by Category 5 cabling? Is the answer 10G base T, Is it 1000 base LX? Is it 1000 base T? Is it 100 base TX? Or is it 1000 base SX? Which of the following would be the fastest Ethernet standard supported by Category 5 cabling? Is it 10G base T, 1000 base LX, 1000 base T, 100 base TX, or 1000 base SX? Now, if you think you know the answer, do not answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. These should be fun to be able to go through and figure out the details. I think if we ever go through the details of every single one of these, we could probably spend an hour on this, breaking them out and trying to figure out the details. But in this particular case, we don't have an hour. We're going to go through this process. Oh, Mr. Mystery, you're so nice in the chat room asking how you can donate. I do not take donations. So that is one where, in this particular case, I don't take them. I try to give you something for the money you spend. So if you want to buy some course notes, that's a great way to do it. That's actually a fantastic way to help donate, because every dollar, every penny of that goes back into doing this, except for you have to pay a little bit for the credit card companies take their part off the top, but everything else goes back into taking care of this. So folks in the chat room you're doing that, it does really do help for absolutely doing this. I appreciate it. The Ethernet standards are a good one. We don't have to know a lot of Ethernet standards in this latest Network Plus exam. Previous Network Plus exams had maybe 20 different options there. Oh, and of course, the Amazon link is another good way to contribute as well. Thank you, chat room. You go to professormesser.com/Amazon. It'll be a fantastic way to help get things going here. And it's one where you can decide what you'd like to purchase and have Amazon send that to you. Another example, we're going to talk about this really quick as well, since somebody in the chat, Keen Observer in the chat room, says, I was told the OSI model was experimental and that the layer 5-layer TCP/IP model was used in the professional world. We never use the IP model. The TCP/IP model, I promise you, only used in books. That is the only time you will see the TCP/IP model is on a certification exam. You will never run into it anywhere else. OSI is the standard we use everywhere for everything, always. It is we never deviate from it. It's an interesting story that got us there, because the OSI model was fashioned after the OSI protocol. And OSI protocol never made it. We never used it. It's not used. OSI protocol fell away, but the standard remained. What protocol won? TCP/IP. So do we use the TCP/IP model? We do not. So we use the TCP/IP protocol and the OSI model. Does that make sense? Nope. Is that how we do things? Yep. That's absolutely it. Let's see how we do things on this one. Which of the following would be the fastest Ethernet standard supported by Category 5 cabling? 50% of you say it's 1000 base T. 32% say it's 100 base TX. And then we have 11% said 10G base T. 6% said 1000 base LX, and 1% say 1000 base SX. Now, one of the things as we go through this is looking at these answers. We'll step through each one of those in just a moment and figure out why they are or are not the right answer here, and be able to do this. And let me get rid of some of the misstatements of our industry relating to Category 5 cabling, which some people have even brought up in the chat room. 1000 base T is gigabit Ethernet over Category 5 twisted pair cable. Category 5 or better. This is the standard that is written in the IEEE 802.3 standard. This is, in fact, this was the standard we were using to run gigabit Ethernet over Category 5 back when we were doing Category 5. Now, what you don't see these days is that it's very, very hard, if not near impossible, for you to actually physically touch a Category 5 cable. Category 5 is not one we used for a long period of time. We used a very, very short period of time relative to where we are today. Practically all Category 5 cabling you're going to see is actually Cat 5e for enhanced. And I think because of that, many people, many books specifically, and training materials believe that Cat 5e is what the minimum standard is for gigabit over twisted pair, but that's not actually the case. The standard itself, the 802.3 standard, which you can download from the IEEE, specifically states Category 5 is the minimum category you would need to run 1000 base T over copper. It's very clearly in the standard. Now, what some books have said, for some reason, I don't know why this is they said, well, you could run it over Cat 5, but it won't run very well. Also not true. Runs great. Runs just fine. In fact, the differences between Category 5 and Category 5E are so minor that if you were to put a cable tester on a Category 5 cable, it will probably show you results that are the same as a Category 5E. It will perform just as well as a Category 5E. The reason we added the E for enhanced is we made minor changes to the way some of the cable was twisted to be able to prevent some crosstalk in very specific situations. And in fact, these corner cases of crosstalk are probably rare, if in this case ever seen today. So at least one person in the chat room says, hey, we have some Category 5 in the wall, and you probably might find some if you look hard enough. But Category 5E has been out for so long that it is the predominant standard that you see out there. So this is one where a lot of the content on the internet, I think one person got it wrong, and I think other people copied the wrong answer. And now I think that we have half of the resources you will find on the internet say you have to run Category 5E instead of Category 5, which is just simply not true. It's in the standard. It's patently incorrect to be able to do that. And if somebody is telling you, and some people will mention this, and I've seen this written in books, well, if you try it on Cat 5, you'll notice it doesn't work really well. No, it works great. Now, the Category 5E cabling, Category 5 cabling you're using may not be good cable. You may have a short in it. You may be running it across a fluorescent light. You may be running it longer a distance than the standard. There's nothing in Category 5 that Category 5 runs gigabit Ethernet just as good as Category 5E, just as fast, just as reliable. So I don't know where the differences came from or how that happened, but that is why I put this question in here. The answer is what 51% of you answered, which is 1000 base T. Gigabit Ethernet is the fastest Ethernet standard supported by Category 5 cabling. Very common to see that there. 10G base T, 10 gigabit Ethernet requires some additional shielding and separation of wires. It is not the fastest Ethernet standard supported by Category 5 cabling. 1000 base LX and 1000 base SX are fiber standards. They obviously would not work with Category 5 because Category 5 is copper cabling. And the 100 base TX, 100 megabit Ethernet is what some people will say because that's what the books say, but that's actually not correct. That's not the fastest Ethernet standard supported by Category 5. 100 base TX is certainly supported on Category 5, but you can go much faster than that on Category 5. Now, what is the difference, people are asking, between 1000 base T and 100 base TX? One has a T at the end, one has a TX at the end. What's the difference? They just put a different number and a letter on the end of it. That's it. Whenever they put the names on these, there's obviously some thought that went into it. If you put a 100, that's 100 megabit. If you put a 1000, that's 1000 megabit. So they did put some thought into it, but there's no specific pattern, reason, or explanation for the numbering or the lettering. There's no standard associated with that. That's just what they chose to call it, 1000 base T, to have that there. They could have called it 1 base L, and it would have been the standard. There's no real requirement they do that. So that's one of those, to be able to have that there. So hopefully that will help you as you go through this and figuring out the details of what is the right answer there. And when somebody says, oh, Cat 5 can only go 100 megabits, you could say, actually, looking at the IEEE 802.3, very different answer, to be able to have that there. Hopefully that will help you as well, because that is the answer. People want to know, so what's the right answer? The right answer is what the IEEE standard says, and that's the one that everybody uses. And there's the question. So what's correct for the certification? The correct answer for the certification is the correct answer for the world, which is 1000 base T. That is what runs over Category 5. See what I mean? It comes up all the time. Let's do another question that's not quite so... oh, by the way, if you're watching this for continuing education unit credit, follow these instructions and I can send you an email to be able to do this. The process is you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. In the top or the bottom, there's a Contact Us link. You must use that Contact Us link if you want to receive the CEU message from me. In that Contact Us link, there'll be a form that comes up. Put your name, your email address, put your information in there about what that, in the subject line, say that this is the Network Plus, February 2020 Network Plus study group. And then in the body of the message on a single line, please put the super secret code word phrase of the month, which is Category 5. There, make it easy. We're not going to do all the different standard names. Category 5 is the super secret code word of the month. Put that in there. You can, of course, put anything else you would like in there as well. You can put any message. I'm the one reading these and processing them. So if you want to send a message to me, I can't necessarily respond to every single one of them, but I read through everything you send me. So you're welcome to do that. Put those in there. So that, again, top or the bottom of the website, go to the Contact Us link, put your name, your email address, specify that this is the February 2020 Network Plus study group, and the body of the message on a single line, put the word Category 5. Takes me about a week to turn these around. So if you don't get a response immediately, it's because I'm lazy. No, it's because there's craziness going on here. I like to group them all up into one big thing, and then I just sift through them and ship them out all in one case. And there's a little bit of laziness there too. So I'll cop to that. That's fine. I try to get them out. If you're in a need to get these quickly, if there's a time constraint, just let me know. I'll get them right out to you immediately. So it's easy to do, to have those things there. Hopefully that can help you as well. And people in the chat room, very quickly before we go to the next question, asks, where could you report bad advertisements on your YouTube channel? Boy, that's hard, tough when those sneak in. Sorry about that. But there's a little link on the bottom of the advertisement that you can use to report a bad ad. It's right on the ad itself. So that can get you there. And these are all the ads are provided by YouTube. I don't know what the ads are. So if one sneaks through, you can let them know about that. They'll be able to do that. Let's do another question. The question now is, which of the following would be the most efficient choice for streaming video over a secure connection? Which of the following would be the most efficient choice for streaming video over a secure connection? Would it be HTTPS? Would it be DTLS? Would it be SSH? Would it be RDP? Would it be FTPS? Just a jumble of letters as the possible answers. For those of you listening in, we'll do this again. Which of the following would be the most efficient choice for streaming video over a secure connection? Would it be HTTPS, DTLS, SSH, RDP, and FTPS? So hopefully that's one where you're familiar with some of these technologies. If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. Put in your answer. Please, no answering in the chat room. No hints in the chat room. No ideas in the chat room. We'll figure it out. We'll know what one does. We'll figure out the details in this, and we'll get to it eventually anyway for those and finding out the details. Yes, we could do a whole 1 hour on advertising on YouTube, and the challenge, it's a constant challenge. There's obviously, if you're someone who's a YouTube creator, there's constant communication about it. There's constant changes about it. I try to put very minimal amount of ads. I try not to put ads in the middle of a video. Most of my videos do not have ads in the middle. I try to make it as easy as possible for you to learn what you need to learn. But at the same time, the companies that have all my servers that are hosting it always every month want me to pay for them. So what you're watching videos passively really does help keep those servers running on this end. So it's exceptional that we're able to make that combination of things happen. So let me also, if you're running into something that's just not quite right, let me know, because I can always go through that process as well and figure out the details of all of these. Which of the following would be the most efficient choice for streaming video over a secure connection? What would it be? This is one where hopefully you're familiar with these. All of these, by the way, because this came up in the chat room, we were going through it. All of these are real things. So hopefully that can help you as well. HTTPS, DTLS, SSH, RDP, and FTPS are not just a random set of letters I stuck together. They really are real things. So it's another example, though, that if one of those doesn't look familiar, make sure you make a note of it so you can go back to your notes and your videos and have a look at all of those. There's some questions in the chat room. We'll talk about in a moment about the new CCNA. Maybe we'll talk in the after show. Be a good time to talk about the CCNA. So send me that question again in the after show to make sure that I see that, because there's some good things to talk about associated with that. And I have some plans for the CCNA. Hopefully these plans will come to fruition. That's always the challenge, isn't it? Let's see how you answered this one. Which of the following would be the most efficient choice for streaming video over a secure connection? HTTPS, huge majority, 68% of you say HTTPS. 21% say DTLS, still a good number of folks. And then single digits, 7% said SSH. And a tie for fourth, RDP said 2%. FTPS say 2%. So what would be the most efficient choice for streaming video over a secure connection? And as some people mentioned in the chat room, which was almost a hint, but I didn't delete it, was DTLS, the Datagram Transport Layer Security. So this has security in it, the same type of security that you would see with HTTPS, which is, we call it SSL, it's really TLS. That's where the TLS comes from. That this is transport layer security. I guess we're really trying to use TLS, and we'll stop saying SSL eventually. The other part of this that's pretty useful is the transport of this is UDP. It's not using TCP, which requires that there be an acknowledgement to the data that is sent. It's using UDP, which doesn't require an acknowledgement. It just sends the data, streams it out, and doesn't expect to hear anything else from the other side. That's pretty efficient because we're not using additional bandwidth coming back the other side to be able to do those communications. Well, you would think, why wouldn't you use TCP? Because TCP is so useful. We're able to reorder packets if they are received out of order. If we lose data, it can be retransmitted. That's a nice feature of TCP. But we're talking about streaming video. Streaming video, there's no chance to back up and retransmit data. You either receive the video in order or you don't. TCP is sort of in the way of the process. So if you drop packets in a video, there's no way the video doesn't stop and say, 1 moment, please, while we back up 5 seconds, and we'll play this section of the video again. That would be the worst Netflix ever, to be able to have to watch it over and again every 5 seconds, backing up. That is not the way we should do streaming video. The most efficient way is to send it over UDP and have that UDP communication just send the data. If we drop a packet, we've lost it. We'll make it up as it comes along. We'll just keep it going, and we don't have to back up through that view, which means in this case, DTLS, 21% of you said DTLS. That's actually the right answer. That datagram transport layer security, extremely efficient in being able to use that. It was not HTTPS, which uses TCP. So indeed less efficient to be able to send this data. Now, in reality, there are other video streaming protocols that are used to be able to send the data from places like YouTube. It doesn't necessarily use DTLS, but it is using UDP to be able to do that. DTLS to be able to have that happen. And it's using UDP. UDP is the layer 4 protocol that DTLS uses. So ultimately, it goes all the way to the top on the transport layer security. DTLS, you've got the encryption on top of that. So now you're looking at layer 5 and layer 6 to have those there. And I believe there is a connection set up in DTLS to make that happen as well. So you're probably going all the way to layer 6 with DTLS, if I have to do that off the top of my head, to be able to make that happen. That is the right answer, DTLS. And I know that we've kind of come to the top of the hour, but I want to do let's do another question. We're going to go into overtime, if that's okay with everybody. We'll go to the after show after this question. We'll do one more because we can't end on that one, right? This question asks, which of these would be used to prevent a device from modifying a spanning tree configuration? Didn't we just do this one? I think this is we're going to skip ahead. It is. There we go. We're skipping ahead, everybody. There we go. This is a better one. A network administrator would like to block TCP/80 from incoming traffic on a server. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? And if you were listening earlier today, you might be able to answer this one by going to professormesser.com/QA. This might help you. The possible answers are nmap, TCP dump, netstat, route, and IP tables. A network administrator would like to block TCP/80 from incoming traffic on a server. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be nmap, TCP dump, netstat, route, or IP tables? And if you were listening earlier, this might help you. By the way, a great use of actual exam experience is what we are seeing right here, is that a previous question may help you answer a question later. So make sure that you're very familiar with watching these as they go along. You may find that the exam itself helps you answer other questions. That's why one of the strategies I often mention to people is jump over the performance-based questions and just do the multiple choice, because I find that the questions and the answers of the multiple choice help me remember things that are going to help me on the performance-based questions. That's the strategy I use. That may not be the one that works for you, but that's taking advantage of the exam itself. The CompTIA exam allows you to jump to any question at any time. It's not a linear type path. So you can jump to the last question on the exam, to a middle question, to the beginning, anywhere you'd like at any time. So that's one that might help you on your exam as well. A network administrator would like to block TCP/80 from incoming traffic on a server. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Let's see how we did. And if we look at our answers, we're torn. Again, not quite what I was looking for. Some people came up with the one that the networking people would think would be obvious, an access control list. But that wasn't the question. The question, in fact, this is very common on the exam, is they say, which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Not which of the most obvious might be the best choice for this task. They say, of the possible answers we have here, which one would you use? Well, for example, maybe you don't have access to an ACL on a router or switch. So there's an example of where you would be. So the real problem here is we have to somehow block traffic over a specific port and protocol. How could we block traffic over that protocol? The tool that we would use to do that is IP tables. IP tables is a stateful protocol generally based or built into Linux. Certainly something you can add to Linux to have that there. It's usually in the operating system itself. Think of it as the software firewall. You have Windows firewall on Windows. You have IP tables on Linux. You can think of it on that way. So anything you like to filter out, IP tables is a great way to do it. Now, if you've ever managed IP tables, not the most straightforward firewall in the world. It has its own way of doing things that are very different than any other firewall you will ever find, but it's extremely effective. I think almost everybody is now kind of converted over to Firewall D, to have that there. And I think that's one that works a little bit better to have those there. As people are mentioning, and as I have here, right here, it filters packets in the kernel. Some people are saying it's better than the Windows firewall because IP tables filters packets in the kernel. Windows firewall filters packets in the kernel as well as the Windows kernel. Part of it does operate at the kernel level in Windows, as does a lot of things these days, which are either good or not good. It's one of those challenges we have with operating systems and how they're operating these days and how to secure them, is the fact that we're doing so much now in the core part of the operating system. So those of you, 36% of you answered IP tables. That is the right answer. Would not be Nmap. We talked about Nmap earlier, which is great for scanning a remote device, determining what ports might be available, determining what operating system may be running on that device, determining what services may be running on that device. But Nmap does not block traffic. It is simply used to be able to query or map what is going on your network with Nmap, to have that there. It's exactly where it does. IP tables, the basic IP tables is all command line. You're absolutely correct. I think there is a GUI front end for IP tables. What was the name of it? There is one. that you can load. But generally, people who are working on a Linux server never get to a graphical front end. You just do everything at the command line. It's just so much easier to be able to work that way. Very low bandwidth. You can SSH in, you can do what you need, and you're out. I run multiple Linux servers for ProfessorMesser.com. I never go to a graphical front end. I'm always doing my administration at the command line. It seems like it would be harder to do it at command line. As it turns out, much easier. Easier to automate, easier to configure. Almost everything is a text file. Anyway, IP tables is the right answer. If you answered E, that is exactly where you should have gone to answer that. Make sure you are familiar with all of those different features, capabilities, and things you would need to know to be able to have that there. All of these questions today and all of the questions you get on your actual Network Plus exam are coming directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have the CompTIA exam objectives, you are doing yourself a disservice. Everything you need to know is in there. If you're ever wondering what topics you will be asked, if you're wondering what topics are the most important, or you're wondering if you know everything you need to know prior to going into the exam objectives will tell you. So you can see why this is such an important tool to have, is these exam objectives. Make sure you've got your downloaded these. Some people will print them out and will physically cross through. I do it online. I use a PDF editor and I highlight different things and use it to arrange my videos. All of my videos are based on this. This is also a great checklist. If you're thinking, maybe I should take the exam, go through this, check off all the things you think you know. If there's more things you don't know than do know, then maybe it's not quite time to take that exam yet and be able to make that happen. So make sure you get your hands on those objectives. You can find those at professormesser.com/objectives or simply Google CompTIA exam objectives. We do one of these study groups every month. Usually we do one a week. And as you can tell, this week's a little odd because we're doing our study group on Wednesday. We're doing our Security Plus study group on Friday at noon, which I don't think we've ever done a Friday at noon study group. We're doing one this week. Our Security Plus study group is in 2 days at noon if you're watching this live. But if you're ever wondering when the next study group is going to be, you can simply go to professormesser.com/calendar, and you can, of course, see when the next grouping of events is going to be. For example, next month, kind of crazy. Next month, very weird with the scheduling. So if you're very accustomed to our scheduling, this is one where you can see this is very different. Our A+ study groups will be on March 17th and March 19th. Our next Network Plus study group on March 24th. Our next Security Plus study group on March 26th. I will be busy writing more questions so we can just get through the month of March to have all of those there. Isn't that great? Plenty to do. I love doing these. I like the interactivity. I like having you here to be able to answer the questions I don't know, which helps me too, to be able to do all of those. We do all of these at noon Eastern time. If you'd like to see the time in your area, simply go to professormesser.com/calendar, and I've got a time converter there that will tell you what it is in your particular neck of the woods. Stick around for the next hour. We've got the after show coming up. We're not done. I will stop asking questions. This is the part where you ask me questions. We'll open up the phone lines. I'll take questions from the chat room. We'll talk to some of these and go through the process. I'd like to remind you that we have pop quiz questions for Network Plus available on Twitter. You can follow us at professormesser.com/Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube, professormesser.com/YouTube. We've got our course notes at professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes, or follow the links in the menus at the top of the website. Don't forget to support us on Amazon at professormesser.com/Amazon. You can pretty much type professormesser.com/Instagram /LinkedIn / you can put a slash in where you think I should be, and maybe that will get you there to be able to have those there. We've got plenty more to do in this next hour. Stick around. We're going to do our after show. Thank you for being here in the first hour, though. I love doing the Q&A. I can't wait to do the one next month already. So thanks for being here and joining us, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Now it's time for me to somehow find all the right buttons to push. There we go. Get my phone line set up to call in so that you can call in. If you would give me just a moment to do that, I will give you instructions on how you as well can call in to our show and be able to answer or ask questions of me directly. So this takes me a moment because not only do you call into the show, but I call into the same show. So it's going to make some beeping noises here in just a moment. There we go. And I'm going to push some buttons on my side, and it's going to say,
enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Of course it is. And then I enter my 6-digit PIN number, and it says,
welcome.
See, I love how that works. To have all of those things there. And you can also ask questions in the chat room. Go to professormesser.com/live, or if you're on YouTube, it's the same chat on the YouTube side for the YouTube chat. I can take questions from there as well. If you would like to call in, though, over voice communication, this is one where we communicate talking to each other. This is one where you can call in this toll-free number in the United States, 855-785-RJ45, west of the Rockies, 855-785-7545. We've also got a way that you can call in anywhere in the world for free, because this is a toll-free number in the United States. You can use Skype to call a toll-free number in the United States, and it doesn't cost you any Skype minutes. I pay for the call. So put a +1 at the beginning, +1, 855-785-7545, and you can get into the queue, which is filling up quickly. There's one last slot there. If you get a busy signal, you can wait till one of the next calls is over, and you can get in with those slots there to be able to listen in for all of these. Let's answer a question from the chat room, then we'll go to the callers that are there. Maybe I should turn that on so they can hear what's going on. One of the questions, can I give any clarity on the marking scheme? I'm assuming you're referring to the way that the exams are graded. And there is not only no clarity, there is intentional obfuscation of the way that the grading is done on these exams. CompTIA tells us nothing. They don't want us to know how it's graded. First off, the exam is graded on a scale from 100 to 900. So already it's a weird scale. We also believe that every question is worth a different number of points. And CompTIA has told us on some questions, especially performance-based questions, they might give a different credit depending on how many you get right. So you can get partial credit on some of them, but not partial credit on others. They don't tell you which ones. So can I give you any clarity on the marking scheme? I can give you zero clarity because CompTIA doesn't give us any clarity. And I think it's by design. I think there's a lot of inside baseball they play on the back end. They don't want somebody else duplicating what they're doing or emulating what they're doing. So it's a big mystery. I think my best advice to you is do as well as you can on every question. Try to get every question right. Answer every single question. Don't leave any blank. And if you do that, that's all you can really do. The way it's graded is not up to us. Who knows what will come from that? So unfortunately, I can't give you any insight because there isn't any. Maybe someday we'll learn some more. Probably not. I don't think that's going to happen. Let's go to the phone calls. We will go to the 972 area code in Texas. Hello, caller. Are you there? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Professor. This is Roddy calling from Dallas, Texas.
Oh, welcome, Roddy from Dallas. What can we do for you?
I had my Network Plus certification 2 days after the last video that you did,
oh, yeah.
the live video. Yeah, I passed the exam. Thank you so much for your advice.
Congratulations.
I would like to give some, without evaluating any rules and laws regarding the exam.
You have listened to the study group before. Please, we would love to get some insight from you.
Yeah. First of all, you have to figure out the testing center environment and choose the best time that would fit you throughout the day. That's the first step that anybody should consider. And then making yourself comfortable, as you said in your recommendation, take some sleep, take some rest, breathe it off, as you can see,
right.
as you can say. Yeah. And for the exam itself, I've seen that a lot of students are confused about the subnetting topic.
Right.
Now, regarding the subnetting topic, it's easy. It's nothing to stress about. I found that they might not ask you to subnet as the way you mentioned, but it's the whole idea is to understand the topic in general, like default gateways, subnets, broadcast, how they connect to each other, all that.
This is probably one of the biggest, most stressful parts of the exam for a lot of people. They spend an enormous amount of time going through subnetting. But if you look at the exam objectives, it's a small piece of a much larger section that is in a larger domain that is one of many domains in the exam. And what people have told me is they might get one subnetting question on the exam. Some people have told me I didn't get any subnetting questions on the exam, which was probably a violation of their candidate agreement to say that to me. But since I'm not held to the candidate agreement, I can tell you and other people that are listening that don't stress about the subnetting. I think you're spot on with that advice.
Yeah, one thing also to support the students on taking the certification, CompTIA support the academia-store.comptia.org, which is a supported store by CompTIA, which will give you a huge discount on different exams. For example, you can take the A+ for $103. You can get the Network Plus for $195, but you have to verify the university that you're coming from. I think it might not be available for all the students around the world, but if you are in an accredited university, you can get the discount easily. You can buy 6 vouchers, like you can take the A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and fail with them twice, and you're all good.
It's true. And people,
you can also use
don't
those.
know about that. 100. I've got it up on my screen right now while you're talking, Rowdy. And the academic A+ voucher, $103, a significant discount. That's a good tip.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Actually, it was very beneficial to me just to save some money on the exams and boost yourself for the other certifications.
They're very strict on making sure that you are a student in a university or college that they find acceptable in the United States. But boy, you can really save some money. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Professor Messers, for all the high definition videos. I also wanted to give other resources that students might get some help with it, if you are okay with it.
Oh, yeah.
Until you finish doing your practice test, I'm aware that you are working on doing some practice tests in the future. There is a course on Udemy that you can buy good practice tests with the 75 piece. It's from a professor called Dion Training. I found it to be very beneficial and close to the actual exam.
Fantastic.
And I hope that we see some great content regarding test questions and everything from ProfessorMercer.com.
I hope you do as well. If they could just make the day a little bit longer than 24 hours, that would be awesome, Roddy.
Well, thank you so much, Professor, for all your advices on high definition content.
I appreciate the call. Congratulations
thank you so
again.
Much. Thank you so much, Professor. Bye-bye.
Fantastic. So good to hear. Those types of calls make my day. I love hearing when people can get that certification. They're working towards something. They earn that particular credential, because I think especially Network Plus, A+ gets a lot of press, Security Plus, very popular. Network Plus and networking in general is it's the core of IT. Everything you do in IT is going to touch the network. So I think that's an important one whenever people start talking about What should I do? So networking is the core of where all those start. Let's go 850 area code, my neck of the woods. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, this is Walt from Mobile, Alabama. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Walt. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I just following what Roddy said. I had just taken my Network Plus exam on January 31st and passed it. And I just wanted to thank you for all the videos and for the notes, especially the notes, because I was able to buy those notes from you and study those along with your videos. And then I had some book resources also that I looked at and took notes from that, and I was able to pass my exam. Nice.
Congratulations on that. Roddy gave us some tips on things to worry about on the exam, things that he found on the exam. We obviously we can't give away actual exam information because of the candidate agreement, but are there certain tips that helped you during the study process that you would recommend?
You know, my son also passed it last month.
Wow.
Also the exam in December. So
no pressure there, Dad.
And I'll go by what he said. Huh?
I said no pressure there, Dad.
No, but yeah. Following him though, it was it's just like what he said. You know, take the exam objectives, look at those, make sure you know what each one of those topics are talking about, and if you're not comfortable in answering those, go over that material, research it, get comfortable with it before you take the test.
Probably one of the things I keep saying over and over and over again, and it's one of those situations where I'm not sure it sinks in for everybody, but the folks that do go through, I'm showing my exam objectives, the ones I use up on the screen now, and you can see I spend tons of time in here. I highlight, there's different colors, there's things I'm working on, there's changes that I'm working on. They are such an important resource. I think you're absolutely right to highlight that. Congratulations on your Network Plus certification.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Walt. I appreciate the call. That's fantastic. Again, we're 2 for 2 there on the calls. So good to hear those stories as well. Let's see. Go to the next caller, 703 area code. Hey, caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm Jordan. I'm calling from Washington, D.C.
Hello,
I
Jordan.
had a few questions. This is a little bit off topic. It's about the CompTIA A Plus.
There are no topics. You can ask anything you'd like, and we're more than happy to address it. What can we do for you?
All right, perfect. I just got done passing my 1001
Yep.
test, and I want to see where I can go from here. Like, is there a time frame that I need to take the second part, or is it going to matter how much time I have, basically?
I've seen
before I can get the
people.
whole life.
Yeah, some people online, some people don't realize the A Plus exam is actually 2 exams. Unlike Network Plus, you have to take the 1001 and the 1002. You can take them in any order. Some people take the 1002 first and then go back and take the 1001. That's probably not normal, but you can do it. CompTIA doesn't care what order you take them in. And a very common question people ask is, once I finish one, how long do I have to finish the other one? Is there a time frame? One very common answer I always see to this on the internet is you have a year to take that second one, which is not necessarily the case. CompTIA just wants you to take both of them while they are available to take. So that exam version 1001, 1002 was released last year, which means these exams will probably be around about another 2 to 2.5 years. So what they say is you have to get both of them taken and passed before that exam series is retired. So you have about 2.5 years from this point to take the next step. I don't recommend you wait 2.5 years, but you could do that. You could take it on the first day it's available, and then you could wait 3.5 years and take it on the last day it's available. And if you pass both of those, you would still have your A+ cert.
All right, so my first test wouldn't expire at any time unless a new test comes out, basically. Right.
At some point, they're going to have to retire this exam version, 1001, 1002. I guess they'll go to the 1101 and 1102 next, if they keep the same numbering scheme. If they get rid of the 1000 series, you would have to start over with the 1100 series, and nobody wants to see that happen. So just make sure you get that second exam completed before they retire this version in 2.5 years.
All right. Thank you for that. I'm trying to get on this, get my license soon, so I'm trying to finish that in the next month, hopefully,
Nice.
And I really do appreciate your videos. They're amazing. They help me out a lot, and
I appreciate it, Jordan. Thanks for the call and best of luck.
Thank you. You have a good one.
That's always good, too, to know there's no stress in, do I have to do it in a certain amount of time? Is it going to disappear? You just never know when those things come up. With A+, you just got plenty of ramp right now to finish that other one. Before we go back to the calls, Michael in the chat room was nice enough. I've seen you post it a couple times. I'm just not quick enough to catch it when you post it, so thank you for posting it again. The question was, the new CCNA exam can be recertified by continuing education credit. In fact, they've had renewals before. They've changed a lot with their renewal process. The question was, I'd like to know, do you have any plans on making any content for the new CCNA? This is one that everybody's excited about. The actual first day of availability of the new refined, revised, restructured Cisco Certified Network Administrator exam is this month. On the 23rd is the first day you'd be able to take that exam. So everybody's waiting to hear how things go with CCNA. It used to be the CCNA was two separate exams. At least the majority of people would take two separate exams to earn their CCNA. What Cisco did was completely revamp the entire process, though. This can either be good or be bad. If you're someone who's followed Microsoft through the years, they have revamped their certification exam, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in very, very bad ways. It looks like their revamping of the CCNA, though, looks pretty good. Everybody's giving it a very big thumbs up so far. It looks to be more streamlined. There's less things in the way. Having a single exam to get you into the Cisco way of doing things seems to be to their best interest, but I think it's also the best interest of us as technologists too, because I think most of us in networking understand that's a really tough exam to pass, but you learn a lot of really good content on CCNA. I have considered, because I have some CCNA content today for the existing older exam. I have a set of course notes for the CCENT. Those will obviously go away on the 23rd. They will no longer be available. But I've been thinking about some other types of training materials for the CCNA, and I don't want to announce anything quite yet because I'm doing some testing of this over the following weeks. But I'm hoping to have something that is not necessarily a training course, although I'm not ruling that out at this point. But I think the CCNA and any of the Cisco exams are hands-on. They really expect you to do a lot of labbing, a lot of hands-on. In some cases, people say, I need actual equipment. I don't think that's necessarily true for this. But the CCNA really requires you knowing how to do things at a command line and working very quickly with switches and routers. So I'm hoping to have some content for you that would work towards more hands-on content, and I'm hoping it would be kind of fun. So we'll have to see how that turns out. I don't want to give too much away because it might all just be not work out. It may never show up. I always have that. There's always a contingency there. I may go through this entire process and realize this was a horrible idea. We are not doing this. So we'll see what comes of that in those options. The Cisco, by the way, does have their exam objectives out for the new version. Their book was published, I think, last month, the month before. So the book for the latest content has been out for a while. So I expect there'll be some people taking the new exam straight away whenever it's available. So it's all out there. You can absolutely do it. Now, Cisco, as some people in the chat room are mentioning, is it worth getting Packet Tracer if you're getting Network Plus? For those not familiar, Packet Tracer is a Cisco piece of software that effectively, it's an amazing piece of simulation where you could build an entire network out of Packet Tracer. The Packet Tracer, if you find Packet Tracer on the Google, they'll show you those things. Of course, they don't have a good image of Packet Tracer, so I'll try to show you one on the screen so you can see what some of these things look like. Packet Tracer is a remarkable tool. It allows you to really build an entire network of routers, switches, configurations, wide area network links. You can plug them all together. You can do IP addressing. You can really make a very complex environment all in this simulated world. And then you can send traffic across it. You can put workstations on and ping across it. You can access web servers across it. You can capture packets with Wireshark inside of it. Remarkable things that you could do to be able to have this here. Packet Tracer is a bit outside the scope of Network Plus. It's not necessary that you understand how to configure routers and switches to be able to pass your Network Plus. Can it help you with understanding routing protocols, IP addressing, default gateways? Absolutely it can. It has a pretty big ramp. So it takes a little bit of time because you have to know how to use a router, how to use a switch, how to configure a router and switch effectively from the ground up. And that's just so much work to be able to learn that part that you will not use on Network Plus. Now, eventually, when you get into doing Cisco, hopefully Cisco certifications would be a next step if you're into and interested in network administration. This is absolutely a tool that will help you for Cisco certifications. So this is one that you may find is really, really useful. I would say if you really want to go to the next step and really spend time learning the details of some of these routing protocols and IP addressing schemes and those types of things, Packet Tracer might help you. If you're not interested in doing that, you're not losing anything by not using that for Network Plus. It's well outside the scope of what Network Plus would require from you and being able to do that. So hopefully that can help with those. And there are some slimmed down versions of it available for iOS and Android as well. They're very slimmed down. They're not quite the power that you would have on the Windows. I guess Windows and Linux is what they've traditionally had for Packet Tracer. I don't think there is a Mac OS version, although I've seen people using Wine or other technologies to be able to use it in Mac OS. I think I've tried that in the past, and what I've decided is that just run it in a VM, in a Windows VM or a Linux VM, and you'll be much happier than trying to run it in Mac OS natively. So there's your options. Plenty of options available, and a useful one to use. Packet Tracer is a lot of fun to play with too, because you can build a network, instantly start trying things, and you're not hurting anything to be able to do that. I know there are videos on YouTube for running Packet Tracer on a Mac. They don't work well at all. Don't waste your time doing that. You're much better off. The way that you run Packet Tracer on a Mac is you use Boot Camp. That's how you use Packet Tracer on a Mac reliably and have that work. So there you go, to have those things there. Let's go back to the phone calls. We'll get some more questions coming in. The next question from 432. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Frank from Midland, Texas.
Hi, Frank. Thanks for holding for so long. What can we do for you?
Hey, I'll try to be quick. Out here where I'm at in West Texas, there's basically nothing out here. It's just a big desert. So trying to find a testing center is kind of hard. I was wondering if you knew if CompTIA was ever going to maybe switch to an online version where you can do something similar to the Microsoft testing, where it's you at home and you have a webcam and a mic set up. Because now I have to go about 100 miles, a little bit more, for a testing center. So
wow.
I was going to see if you had any insight on that.
That is remarkable. That's a long way you would have to go to be able to do that. CompTIA at one time was doing online testing, but only for a limited number of certifications. And I'm not even sure they're still doing it because I haven't read anything about it recently. But I know they were doing it for, I think, the introductory, the very early certifications for the technology certification and I want to say their project certification. But the results of that, at least the people that have talked to me that have done it, the reviews aren't not so good. Reviews were not good at all. Being able to do this. And it's one of those situations where it's all about execution, because there's so many moving parts with having somebody do an online testing system, especially with certifications that are so important, like A+, Network+, Security+. And we just haven't seen the industry find an easy way to do it either. There's too many opportunities for cheating, and the way that you would proctor it is problematic as well. Trying to work with many different operating systems, trying to make sure that the proctor can see what's going on people's screens. Quite a challenge. I'm not sure the industry has gotten to the point where that challenge has been really resolved. But they haven't. What I was hoping, this was 2 years ago when they were implementing this, if I recall properly, I was expecting them to start ramping it up and saying, well, we tried it with these smaller certs. Let's now roll it out to the bigger certs. And what we found was we tried it with these smaller certs and we didn't hear anything else ever, which leads me to believe that perhaps they are not on board or happy with the results of that as well. That's pure speculation on my part. I'm not a CompTIA partner. I don't want to be a CompTIA partner. I like to have the independence of that. I'm kind of guessing based on how things have gone on their website and at things that other people have said. But maybe they'll shock us all and come out with something in the future. And for the moment, though, I can't see there's been any mention of that anywhere. It sure would be nice for situations like you, though, and other people where you just don't have a lot of local options.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll just have to make the drive then. But hopefully I pass it and I'll have to drive back and forth.
It's good motivation, Frank.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is.
Best of luck.
Thanks for everything you do. Yeah, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the call. That's one that it's so frustrating when you hear those situations. Frank's not the only one in this situation. There's plenty of places in the United States and elsewhere where there's no Pearson VUE testing center anywhere available. And there's ways to do it. There's ways to make it work. There's just too many ways to circumvent it. There's too many ways to cheat without having a 360 camera, which is really what you would need, and being able to watch what's on someone's screen and do this reliably on the internet connections we use today is a challenge. As some people have even mentioned in the chat room, is that we've got, we even had a blip today at 1:19, according to YouTube. They lost connectivity from me because internet works that way to be able to have this. I think whenever I run into those things, that I think is the easiest part for me, is really just focus on getting to a testing center. And I think that's what CompTIA has decided to do as well. It's one of those where you have no good solution to that, unfortunately. Let's go back to the phones. The 513 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor. This is Chris Stubbs calling from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Welcome, Chris. What can we do for you?
Well, I just wanted to call and tell you that I recently bought your course notes for the A+, and I am about on March 10th going in to take my Network Plus.
Nice. So you're now gone through the process. You're coming up on sort of the end of how long has this taken? When did you start studying?
July of last year.
Okay, you're the kind of test taker that I am. It takes forever for me to get through a set of exam objectives and finally get to the point where my life is allowing me to finally take the exam. So this has kind of been a long haul up to this point to finally get to where you are now. Are there certain things in the testing process you found were really helpful that you might want to highlight?
Well, one is knowing your testing center is the biggest thing for me, anyway.
Do you have testing centers in your area? Some are good and some are not as good.
I just go to the school where I took the classes.
Perfect.
Which is the Warren County Career Center in Lebanon, Ohio, is where I took the classes. Well, not at the main campus, but at a satellite campus until the school that we were renting from needed the space, so they asked us to move. So
I
sadly,
think
that campus is
testing centers
no
and
longer
places that have training classes, and universities and colleges tend to have the best testing centers. I've found third parties can sometimes be sketchy, so your tip to check out the testing center before you book the exam can often be a make or break depending on the location.
Right. And the thing is, I've taken tests through that that particular Pearson VUE test center since the 801.
Okay. You're very familiar with this site.
Yes.
Great. That's a great tip for anybody, and one we often don't mention.
Yes. And I'm planning to get a copy of your Network Plus notes as well. I have the A Plus ones on order.
Perfect. I appreciate that. As I mentioned, it goes a long way into supporting what we do here. But I also think these are the notes that I wish I had when I was going in to take my Network Plus exam for the first time. Hopefully, these were notes that can help you as well.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
I will call back again after I have taken the certification.
We can't wait to hear the results. Best of luck with your exam.
Okay.
That's always exciting too, kind of the lead up to taking the exam. And I will mention this. I've mentioned this before in a video or in a live stream, is I went to a testing center in Miami that was, I don't remember if it was CompTIA for Microsoft exam, but it was near the Miami airport, and it was a flight school, and they literally had taken the door off of a closet and put the tiniest desk inside of the closet with a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse, and that was my testing center. The chair was actually outside of the closet. The desk was in the closet, and that's where I took my exam. I want to say I passed that exam. I can't think back to exactly which exam it was, but I want to say I passed it. But you never know what you're going to run into, and that's one of the tips I give people in my exam hacks book is go check it out. Go see what it's like, because I've seen the worst possible testing centers that you can run into. Please don't get into that situation, because it does make a difference on your exam. When you sit down, the environment you're in has a big impact on how well you're going to do on this exam. So that's another great thing to consider. Thank you, Chris, for that. Let's go back to the calls. 678 area code. Hey, caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello. My name is Wally from Riverdale. How you doing, Professor Nestor?
Thanks for calling, Wally. What can we do for you?
Recently I have diverged from a sector in the industry to the IT sector, and I recently took an exam in security, Palo Alto, and I passed. Then I went to the industry to see how I could, get a job. Then noticed that most of the jobs I was coming across were actually requiring for certification in CompTIA. And right now, I'm presently preparing myself for CompTIA Network exam, which I've been studying so hard for the past 1 or 2 months, and I'm at a level now because I've never been in the IT, never in my life been in the IT sector, but I'm trying to go in there now. And I've gotten to a level where I'm finding it so interesting, and that every day I enjoy reading it, but at times the fear of writing something you've never done before sets in. And been doing a study guide based on the networking exam itself. And I see that it entails some single and multiple choice questions. My question is, what advice? I do not really know what the drag and drop is, even if I'm using my intuitions to actually see what it is, because I've been using a DOM from I got on eBay to prepare myself. What advice can you give me, Professor Messer?
Well, the first advice I'd probably give you is don't use those brain dumps. They're just awful. They do violate your exam candidate agreement and the testing agreement that you have with CompTIA, and often they're just wrong in the content or the answers that they try to provide. A lot of the performance-based questions on the exam, my advice to you there, which sounds like what you're talking about with the drag and drop, sometimes they're matching, but all of them are very straightforward in how to operate them. So don't worry so much about the mechanics of the question. Worry more about the topics that are covered on the question. And I usually will tell people when they're studying for the exam, and especially in your situation where you're kind of moving into technology from another field, is there's four things you should do to prepare for your certification exam. The first one, you can watch some videos. They can be my videos or anybody else's. Find ones that work for you. Get a book. A lot of people say, I'm just going to watch your videos and go take the test. And as you've probably seen in the very first video of my course, I don't recommend you do that. I recommend you use these four resources, which is a good set of videos and a good book, sometimes more than one book. But I often tell people, go to Amazon and read through the chapter of the book that they make available for you to read for free, the part that says look inside. And read the book and see if it's one that works for you. Different authors have different voices, they call it, where they write in different ways. And some authors' writing may work better for you than a different author. So that's the second resource you should have, is a good book. The third resource you should have is some hands-on. The Network Plus exam doesn't require a lot of hands-on, but there are certainly some of the tools that you would do. We talked about some today: Nmap, traceroute, ping, dig, NSLOOKUP. Those are tools that are specifically listed in the exam objectives, and you really should know how to use those at the command line. It's very possible CompTIA could ask you to perform a particular function at a command line as one of the performance-based questions, and then that would be a gimme. That would be easy points for you if you knew what those things were. Every utility you need to know is specifically listed in the exam objectives. If it's not in the exam objectives, you don't need to know it. So there's already a very focused view there. And the fourth thing that I always recommend is plenty of Q&A. Make sure that you are spending time testing yourself before you walk into the exam. And there are plenty of really good Q&A testing that's available out there. On my website, under each one of the menus that I have on my site for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, there is a link for recommended resources. So for instance, the four things I just talked about here, those resources are videos, get a good book. I list out what I think are some good books in networking, and you can click on those. Lots of Q&A, plenty of hands-on. So I have plenty of Q&A guides. There's a whole review guide just of Q&A that's out on my site that you could reference. Have a look at that one. And there's some labs available, a Network Plus self-paced boot lab that you could also consider looking at on my site as well. Those are there. They will simply link you over to Amazon so you can see what other choices might be there on the Amazon side. But that's where you should focus your effort, is those four things. And so if you're ever in the process of studying for Network Plus or any certification exam, focus on those four things and you'll do just fine, Wally.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you calling. And I think that's whenever we get into the study process, we often get a little concerned or confused about what we're doing. There's so much data coming at us. It's trying to get into our brain. We almost forget about what's available for us to study from because we're so focused on just trying to get through the study process. So those are the four things I mentioned that will probably be something that can help you as well. Let's go back to the phone calls. The 931 area code, if I click the right button there. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Are you there, 931?
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
You have a question?
Hello, Professor Mesa.
You want to listen into your phone? Don't listen into the stream because there is a delay you'll find.
Yeah.
What's your question?
Yeah, I am preparing for the Security Plus certification.
Great.
And after that, I'm planning to take the Network Plus or the CCNA. So you mentioned some overlap or lack of overlap with respect to switch and router hands-on details needed for CCNA and not for Network Plus. So I guess Network Plus can be regarded as a subset of it, or are there other differences that you would mention that are important to take into account? between them?
There are some. I would say the difference is intention. I think you're correct for the most part at saying Network Plus would be a very good precursor to the CCNA. And in fact, many people do that. They get their Network Plus first, and then they move to CCNA to get more advanced. The differences between those two certifications is massive. I often see people consider them as an either or, which I don't think is a good way to look at these two certifications. Network Plus is a designed to be an introductory certification into networking. The CCNA is a relatively complex and involved certification that focuses on your ability to get switches and routers running in a practical networked environment. It is I would consider it to be a much more difficult certification to get through than Network Plus. So the difficulty level of CCNA is higher, probably much higher than what you would find for Network Plus. So it's really intention, because if you're trying to get your first job on a help desk or a network operations center, they're probably going to be looking for you to have a Network Plus certification or that level of knowledge. They're not expecting you to be able to configure switches. They're not expecting you to be able to configure routers. They might eventually hope that you move into that level, but to get that first job at the NOC or at the help desk, they're not looking for a huge network administrative functionality from you. And in fact, it might work against you because they may feel that you'd be overqualified for that particular job. But if you're someone who is looking longer term at networking, you would like to be a network administrator, you might have in your mind a goal to move into IT security. You would like to know as much as you can about configuring routers and switches. Some people at that point decide to skip over Network Plus and really focus on CCNA and getting up to speed on the basics of those Cisco technologies. This would also depend on what the employer was looking for, which ultimately is kind of what makes our decisions for us. The person hiring us or giving us a higher level position is expecting us to have a certain type of knowledge as well. So let's see if we can figure out what they would like. If they're asking for Network Plus, get your Network Plus. If they say we're really looking for somebody with Cisco knowledge, CCNA is going to be your direction. They're not interchangeable. They are really focused on a completely different role in an organization. You have to do the work on your side to figure out what that role is going to be and then pick the right certification for you.
Okay. Yeah. In my case, I did go through some training for CCNA a few years ago.
Sure.
So what I'm planning is to get a refresh on any networking recent additions to the certification, even though I didn't go through the exam, though. I did the training, but not the exam. So that's why I want to get the exam now and get a refreshing of technology. So that's my goal. And also aiming into security in the end. So
that may be the right path then. The Cisco might be the right path. That might be the right path for what you're doing then. And I think if someone like you has already had that knowledge in the past, you've gone through a Cisco training, you kind of understand what's expected on the Cisco side. I need to know everything at the CLI. I need to know how to configure things in the CLI. I need to know how to back up the CLI. I need to know how to get into a switch or router. If I lose ability to log in through the network side, I need to understand spanning tree. I need to understand routing protocols. I need to understand troubleshooting of these connections. All of those things combined are part of CCNA. Almost none of that is on Network Plus. So there's your differences in those two. Figure out what your employer is looking for, and I think you'll know which one of those you should absolutely work towards. Let's go to 571. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how you doing? Can you hear me?
I can hear you great. What's your question?
All right. Well, actually, it's similar to previous ones. I recently applied for IT help desk position.
Great.
I also just had the interview yesterday. Again, my name is Chris, by the way. So I recently got the interview, so it was sometime yesterday. It was basically IT help desk analyst. Now, it was my first one I was just trying to get my foot in the door. And I used all my resources just to get my resume. And that's really how I got into it. But I've never done like any specific IT help desk. I've done a few things where I troubleshooted desktops in the past or so on and so forth. Now, I think the interview went well. But one of the things they asked me was something about what type of troubleshooting software would I use or that I have used in my past experience. Now, I didn't really know how to answer that, and I was hesitant. Now, I haven't gotten an answer back yet, but I would like some insight on how would I answer that question. And the second question they asked me was about a phishing email. How would I answer that too? If you can just help me with that, and I'm trying to get an answer on that.
What was the specific? I missed the part where you were asking. The second thing they asked was something about email. What were they asking about?
The second one was, what would I do in a case like a customer calls in about a phishing email? Because this is for the local college.
Sure.
Yeah, phishing email.
Sure. Well, there's I think that was a really good question they asked about what tools are in your software toolbox. And I think that is a great question to ask, because whenever you start talking to other professionals, you're always trying to find, what do you use to solve this particular problem? Where do you go to resolve that particular issue? For example, if a good example is if you find a malware infection on a computer, what are the malware tools that the anti-malware tools you would use to remove that malware so that you could at least get the data off of that machine before you completely erased everything and started from scratch or re-imaged that device. So there's things that I would always bring up. I would use my my malware tools, and I have a list of malware tools that I would use. So, for instance, you would say Malwarebytes. I use Malwarebytes all the time to solve that particular problem. I also have a lot of tools that I use from Microsoft website. Things like Process Explorer is a good example. Being able to look into the processes that are on a Windows machine and being able to really see what's happening. So they're really asking you for you to see, what do you use? What are the things you take advantage of to be able to do diagnostics on these particular devices? How do you know if there's a problem? How do you know if a hard drive is having problems? Do you have a tool that allows you to see the smart statistics on that particular hard drive? And if so, what do you use? If you have to troubleshoot a motherboard, what diagnostic tool have you used in the past to do that? And a lot of people don't realize when they buy a motherboard or buy a computer, you probably have a set of tools that came with it. Well, those are great tools to talk about on an interview. I was having a problem with memory on my motherboard. I ran this memory test in Windows, or I ran the memory test that came with my motherboard. And here's a good example of how I solved that problem based on these tools that I used. Everybody has a different tool set as well. We don't all use the same set of tools. So it's almost a conversation to see just how much troubleshooting have you done, so that you can then talk about the tools that you used. Now, if you haven't used any of those tools before, a great place to go, in fact, I'll bring up on my screen so we can all see, is the tools available from Microsoft. The Windows sysinternal tools are fantastic tools to use. If you haven't used any of these sysinternals tools, you can easily search for Process Explorer, and it'll take you right to this page, which is just a ton of file and disk utilities, networking utilities, process utilities, security utilities, system information. You could talk hours about these. For instance, the process utilities has all of this list of process utilities. So Process Monitor, Process Explorer is one that I use constantly on Windows devices that tells me an incredibly large amount of information. We almost have a bunch of this made it into Windows 10, but this takes it to the next level to be able to do this. Just download some of those tools and try them out, and you'll have plenty to talk about when you're in an interview in front of people and being able to work with those. Sysinternals is a fantastic resource for Windows. There's a whole nother set of those for malware. There's a whole nother set of those for Mac OS. There's a whole nother set of those for Linux. But that at least would get you started on that view. Your second question was about phishing and what people are doing in phishing environments. There's a lot of environments where they are sort of prepared for this because any links in an email are automatically rewritten for the end user, which first takes them to a phishing check before they are sent off to the actual place. But I suspect in an interview, I think they're probably looking to see, can you determine what the URL really is inside of that email? We know it says something on the email screen. How do you determine what that link really happens to be? And there's probably a way inside of that email client that they're using to be able to right mouse click on it and view the hyperlink without clicking on it. There's probably other things they're looking for you to know as well, which is if you did click on it, how could you determine whether the page you're looking at is a phishing site or not a phishing site? And they may want you to be able to look at the basics of a certificate, to be able to pull that up in a browser to see what the certificate happens to see, to read, to view the exact URL of where you happen to be. So that it's often that they are probably trying to get that from you to be able to make that connection between how do I really know if it's a legitimate link or not. And those are great techniques to know as well. If you're trying to prevent somebody from visiting a phishing site and there's no other phishing tools that you have in your environment, that's at the core the best way to know that's going to happen. Hopefully that helps, Chris.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I do appreciate it. Thank you so much for actually helping me with that. I guess now I know. If in the case, let's hope they respond to me. And if they do, I'm just waiting until next week, they said. I appreciate that. This is good for future reference for me.
Well, we're all wishing you the best of luck on that one, Chris.
Thank you.
Appreciate the call. That's one where you go through this process of looking for a job and going to interviews and talking to people on the phone, and it can be exhausting to go through this and a little depressing at times as you go through interview after interview after interview trying to make that happen. One of the things that I tell people, though, is it's always just a miserable process until the moment you get an offer. And then suddenly the process was great. Finally, you got the offer and you got the job. This is one where I think you just have to keep churning through it. And you get better as you go. And you learn different techniques as you go. And you try to figure out the best way to approach the situation depending on the environment that you're in. But you almost always are going to find yourself in those situations where it's always horribly depressing. It's always the darkest before that dawn. And when you finally get that offer for that job, it does make the whole process worthwhile. Let's go back to the phones. The 757 area code. If I click my talk button, if I try to click my talk button, there we go. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Martin.
Hi, what's your question?
My name is Martin, and I'm calling from so far away from you. Actually, I'm calling from Bangladesh. Okay.
Well, thanks for calling.
I have a question. I just really and I really appreciate your response call, and I streaming your video in YouTube. I just watching your video, and I just got your number from the screen and in your channel, and I just called you. Regarding, I just completing my BSc graduation in computer science and engineering, and right now I want to go for networking, study in networking in masters. I want to do masters in networking. So what should I do to involve in networking sector and networking field? Can you help me, or can you suggest me something? What should I do for a beginner to build my career in networking sector? So if you give me suggestion, that would be good for me. That's why I'm calling you from Bangladesh, and I hope you will give me a better answer.
Well, let's break this down, because I think that's a common question. For those of you trying to follow along, it's not the best audio connection, but the focus was if you want to do something more on the networking side, if you want to do more networking, or at least have an approach to do more networking in the industry, where should you really start with these things? We talked a little bit about this when we talked about the difference between Network Plus and the CCNA. And I think for the vast majority of the industry, that's your choice. I think if you talk to anybody in the industry, they always say, ultimately, you're going to end up on the Cisco side. That's the direction you should go. Some people feel that you should skip over the Network Plus. Some people feel the Network Plus is a good stepping stone. You're the person who will have to make that decision. I think ultimately, if you skip over Network Plus, you still have to learn everything that you would have had to learn in Network Plus, but now you have to learn it as part of your CCNA studies. So it makes CCNA much more difficult if you don't have the Network Plus, but it is a normal part of the process, I think. And I think that's when a lot of people jump right into the Cisco side, and they just spend a lot more time learning the basics as they go along. If I had to tell somebody, if they had to make one choice, and this is the only opportunity they had to get their network administrator focus and ultimately move into security or some other type of role within IT, I would probably lean them more towards the CCNA. I would just tell them it's going to take you a lot longer because you don't have the foundation yet that you would have gotten from Network Plus. And in fact, there are some topics on Network Plus that are not covered on CCNA. Obviously, there's plenty of topics on CCNA that aren't covered in Network Plus, but they're not interchangeable. But I think for the most part, it's easy to catch up on the Network Plus side. If you don't have Network Plus, it's easy to catch up for the CCNA side. I think that's where people really sort of lean if they're moving into networking. And I think if you're planning to do that, I would seriously focus on looking at those two, figuring out what that next step is going to be, and going through that next step. It's never the situation, by the way, that you set a goal and you do one thing to reach that goal. Very often it's multiple steps along the way to reach that goal. For many people, they might take Network Plus as the first step and CCNA as the second. And there might be other things in the middle of that. Other people are comfortable just taking one big step up to CCNA and working from there. It just depends on what makes sense for you and where you would like to go to be able to make that happen. Thank you for the call. That is a question I think I get a lot in my email, so hopefully that has helped you as well. Let's go back to the call. 682 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 682. Are you there, caller? Oh, you're not there because you dropped off. We'll miss you, caller. Let's do another one. 952. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Hi.
I am calling from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Excellent. What's your question?
And not really a question. It's just kind of advice for people who are taking any of the exams.
Sure.
Just make sure that you know all the objectives, but also there's exam cram is online. You can check with your library. Some of your libraries might have the books on the digital format.
What a great tip, by the way, and one I can't believe we haven't even mentioned today, is that a lot of people who want to get books, local libraries now have access. Some of them have subscriptions to the O'Reilly books, to other publishers' books. So a lot of the things that normally you would buy on Amazon are available for you to get for free at your local library and digitally. You don't even have to go there or fight someone else for the book. You simply request it online and it shows up on your tablet or on your workstation. I think that's probably a resource we don't mention enough, and I don't think a lot of people even think about it, that all of those resources are just there waiting for them at their local library.
Yeah, I just thought I'd mention it.
Great tips.
I know that some other people said money is an issue for them, and I know it's an issue for me. So I got that from someone online.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for the recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
And we don't mention it. My local library has O'Reilly and some other books as well that I can use. Not all libraries have access to all of those resources. And if they have my library does have older certification books in their library. And those can sometimes help you if you look at the differences between the old and the new. I don't often tell people to use older study materials. In fact, you've often heard me say, make sure your study materials match the version of the exam you're going to take. But if you're trying to choose between using no study materials and using some that are from the previous version, you can at least get some of the information you need from there for most of these certifications. For example, A+ and Network Plus haven't changed much over the last version. Security Plus changed a lot in this most recent version. That's probably one I would tell people, don't even use the 401 materials, find some for 501. But for Network Plus, for A+, there's a lot to pull from. You just have to be very good about pulling out the things that are no longer asked about. And that, to this caller's first comment, use the exam objectives. It will tell you what part of the books you should be using and what parts you should not. If you pick up a book and it says you should know about Windows XP, you can probably cross that off your list. You don't need to know about that for the latest A+ exam. Not something you're going to run into. In the chat room, there's a question about my 7-second subnetting. Whenever we talk about subnetting, I show how to do subnetting from the binary perspective. So you can do a conversion to binary, perform the subnetting, convert back to decimal, and you have your results. But as I mentioned in that video, we don't really do that in the industry. We don't have time. We have to be able to subnet very quickly, and we have all kinds of shortcuts to do that. There's the magic number method. There's the pi method. My method is the 7-second subnetting method because there's no math. But I realize there's a lot of charts you write with that. Now, there's that first chart that you write with 7-second subnetting that's pretty quick. But I tend to write out a much longer chart at the bottom of that shows where the different ranges are for the different subnets. And I write that out for at least 2 or 3 of those because it's hard for me to calculate that in my head when I'm in an exam. I wrote the 7-second subnetting specifically for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but it does have some advantages there. If you're somebody who can, in your mind, know where those delineations are for a 128, a 192, a 224 network, and you already know what those are or can calculate them easily, you may not have to write out the whole set of charts. I don't. I do write all of them out in my video, but in practical use, I do not. In practical use in the exam, I probably do. I already know, obviously 128 is easy. The 192 is easy for me because I used to manage a 192 network. But the next 2 or 3 of those I tend to write out just so I can easily reference them on the exam. And they just become more useful and familiar to me as I do more and more tests. And I think going through a lot of subnetting samples, there's a lot of websites that can give you subnetting questions. And if you just start going through them and shotgunning those questions and going through 20 of them, going through 30 of them, going through 40, after a while, you start to see the patterns. They start to fit together. And so you can get through the questions. You'll find them much, much, much faster as you start going through more and more questions. So after 30 minutes, you're good. You got the subnetting part down and you can keep going with your life. Otherwise, you get mired in subnetting. Find the way for subnetting that works for you. Maybe magic number method works better for you. Maybe you're really good at doing powers of 2. That's a great method for you. Maybe 7-second subnetting works best for you. Or take a conglomeration of these, put it together and find the one that works for you based on your own style. You don't have to use our patterns and our methods. Find something that's somewhere in the middle and use one that works for you. Any of those make sense. As long as you're able to do it quickly in the industry and in what we do in the industry, we get subnetting wrong all the time. So there's your little dirty secret about IT is we're all bad at subnetting. We are constantly making subnetting errors. I'm speaking from someone who worked as a systems engineer for a next generation firewall company. I was putting firewalls in some of the biggest networks in the world, working with some of the smartest network engineers and security IT people in the world, plugging these things in, and we would make mistakes all the time because we're human. There's so many numbers. There's so much going on around us. We're plugging into so many different places. Some of this is familiar to us. Some of it is not familiar to us, and you make mistakes. So you just have to do your troubleshooting and go back through and go, oh, we put the wrong subnet mask in. Let me change that subnet mask. Oh, we put the wrong gateway in. Let me change the gateway on that. Happens all the time. So now's the time to make the most number of mistakes with this, but you're never going to be 100% perfect. Nobody is so good at subnetting that they just can do any subnet at any time instantly. It takes us all a second or two to get into subnetting mode and finally write all these things out. And most of the time, if we really want to check ourselves, we're using a subnetting calculator just to make sure we didn't mess it up on the front end. So don't worry that you're not getting it 100%. None of us really do. We are constantly checking ourselves and constantly doing the math, and in some cases getting it completely wrong. The great thing about IP and subnetting is if you get it wrong, you're probably not going to create massive problems. There are places where it will, but usually you're connecting one device, you mess up the subnetting on that device, and it won't talk to anything. So we can fix it very easily. So usually it's it didn't work, let me get it fixed. Now it's working, now we're done with it, and we can go to the next piece of this. So that part is at least there's no disaster waiting for us in many cases. Now, if you're configuring a BGP routing table, there may be a little bit more that you could break. There could be a lot of things you could break. You could break most of the internet, depending on where you're working. So in those cases, you're probably already aware of this. You're already doing more double checking of the numbers. You send it to someone else to make sure they're right. You have a whole process in place. But that's a little different than most of us will run into. And as I mentioned, subnetting is a tiny part of a bigger section that's in a much larger domain that is part of many different domains on the networking exam, Network Plus exam. You might not get any subnetting questions on your exam. You might get one. You might get two. So if you really just can't get past it, you can't seem to get past the subnetting piece of it. It's not clicking for you. My advice is to forget about it. You might not even have to worry about it for the exam. Now, when you get to Cisco exams, completely different world. The 7-second subnetting was written specifically for me to get through Cisco exams. Because on the Cisco exam, every question, there's something relating to subnetting you have to know. There's a troubleshooting section. You have to double check the subnetting on the troubleshooting question that you're getting. You're doing 10, 20, 30, 40 different subnetting processes on that single exam. It helps if you can do it very, very quickly, and that's what I wrote the 7-second subnetting for. So that can help you as you're getting through those. And in the chat room, there's some folks putting some links in, some ideas of where you could go to get some of those. I'll click the show button so people can see those. A lot of places to practice. Just don't worry about it. And I think you'll do fine. Well, thank you for being on this Network Plus study group that we had today. Our first hour, of course, all the Q&A. Thank you for being here for that. There's some great questions, and we were able to do some extras even on this particular one. Thank you for your Q&A here in the last hour. It's always good to hear from you directly and things that you're doing, and it's nice to get that interactivity. As a reminder, normally we do our Security Plus study group next week. Normally it's the following week from this. A little bit different this week. Now it's Friday. So if you're watching this live in 2 days, on Friday, we are doing our Security Plus study group on Friday, same time, 12 noon Eastern time. All of this is in our events calendar. You can find out about that at professormesser.com/calendar and know exactly when the next event is going to be. We'd love to have you come back and do some Security Plus questions with us and more answers in the after show and more questions as well. We always like that. Thank you for being here on our study group. We love to have you here. We will see you next time on the Security Plus, on the Network Plus study group. Didn't get the intro right, didn't get the outro right. Thank you everyone for hanging with us today. Thank you for being here. We will see you on Friday.